Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, and thanks for joining our webinar, Balancing Innovation and Risk in the Digital Marketplace. Welcome and thanks for participating together with Don Rosen, our US lead partner, and Patrick Barnett, the CEO of Qumram. My name is Rudy Blattman. I am the managing partner of LSCP. Good to see a number of names that I have the pleasure knowing personally. As the topic we will address is in this event is an evolutionary process, there will be follow-up webinars and we will keep you posted. We record this session in the aim to give you the opportunity to share your experience within your environment. Please use the question box at any time during the presentation and demo for the Q&A part to come in the last section of this event. So let's get started. You certainly will remember with what type of speed steam was introduced, electricity, automation. It took years. Today, we will look at what speed we are confronted with and what it will mean. New markets that call for a completely different strategy in operations, communication, distribution, not only for industry, but also a different approach for the regulators. So we have recognized that all these changes are going to be enabled or are already enabled by technology. We have asked a provider to participate in this event, showing in an example about how to reach out to individual profiles and masses that could be of interest for regulators. Other questions come up. For example, what is the difference between an e-record, according to FDA's Part 11, and evidence in the digital world? Other legal questions? What privacy for the new comfort zone, etc. So I would like to hand over to Don Rosen, our US lead partner, to set the scene. Don, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rudy. Well, the world is changing rapidly, and it no longer takes years for these changes to take place. Lightning speed is exciting, but lightning can also be dangerous, particularly to the incumbents in an industry. Take, for example, the mobile revolution, which started with the launch of the first iPhone in 2007. Apple essentially controls that industry now, although there are many other players, and BlackBerry and Nokia, who had been major players in 2007, pretty much don't exist anymore. Not only has a new industry grown up which didn't exist anymore, but the internet is primarily accessed now through smartphones far more than through computers or any other mechanism. And this will only increase as the number of smartphones, which is already as large as the number of people in the world, continue to increase. Facebook recently surpassed Google as the most visited site in the US, even though it creates no content. Airbnb, although it owns no real estate, provides more beds than the 100-year-old Hilton Group and is the largest accommodation provider in the world. Uber, which owns no vehicles, is the world's largest taxi company. Alibaba is the most valuable retailer by market cap, but it has no inventory. You can say that these disruptive changes happened almost overnight, and every night another new company is attempting to change an industry. How does this apply to healthcare? Are we seeing the kind of transformation in healthcare that we've seen in other industries? Not yet, not as rapidly, but it's coming. The U.S. healthcare industry particularly are undergoing a major transformation because consumers are playing a larger role in making decisions about their healthcare. Although this has traditionally been a business-to-business model, it's rapidly transitioning to a business-consumer model, although companies have been slow to join this digital movement, which is problematic because patients really expect to be able to manage their healthcare and choose their healthcare services the same way they're able to manage every other kind of service they buy, and which they frequently buy over the internet. There are new entrants to the marketplace now, retailers like Walgreens and technology companies like Apple, who want to play a very large part in this industry. They have disruption on their mind, and they want to have a larger share of the healthcare spend and healthcare decisions. Next slide, please. Another example of disruption in a traditional industry is the watch industry. Although there were 29 plus million Swiss watches sold in 2014, Apple sold 1 million watches in their first 24 hours of introducing the product. Apple has enormous customer loyalty in part because, as Steve Jobs said, they have a relentless focus on improvement and the customer, which is why they're able to beat their competition and get the market share that they now have, which is overwhelming. Next, please. How does this apply in healthcare? Well, the move is to empower consumers. Patients are leading the way in bearing most of the cost of their own healthcare, and therefore want to become informed, empowered, and demanding about healthcare decisions. More than 70% of the patients who are online in the United States use the internet to find healthcare information. And more than 40% of the people who diagnose their conditions through online and research had it confirmed by physicians, and the information is evidently valuable. The more that healthcare data becomes digitally accessible, the more patients will use it to weigh and potentially reject expensive healthcare treatments. This is especially true in the U.S., where the patients pay a much greater percentage of the cost of their drug therapies. 25% is not unusual than they do for other healthcare expenses, such as inpatient services. Not surprisingly, consumers are demanding more information so they can apply the same cost-benefit analysis and research techniques they use to purchase cars or phones when they purchase healthcare. They're also making more informed, rational choices about where they put their money. If companies don't join in this digital dialogue and influence the conversation, they lose an opportunity to shape it, and they may be put on the defensive trying to refute the statements made by those who do take part. Next, please. As regulators, you're moving rapidly to create data liquidity. And this means that the providers and manufacturers of drugs and data and devices will only control a small fraction of their relevant product and safety data. Regulators and others increasingly control the rest, particularly the information that patients have access to. Now, if healthcare follows the path of other consumer-oriented sectors, they'll be competing on data analytics. And winners and losers will be determined in part by who makes the best use of the data available, whether it's data internally in a pharma or healthcare company or externally from regulators, patient advocacy groups, and so forth. Consumers are asserting themselves when it comes to owning this data. They'll contribute health information if the benefit of sharing is clear, but patient engagement has to go beyond product promotion and one-sided conversations about the benefits of a product. Building trust and an authentic relationship between drug makers and patients requires sharing the bad as well as the good. For example, when real-world evidence points to adverse events or diminished efficacy or response rates in a particular population, this information needs to be communicated publicly and without delay if trusted to be maintained. Next, please. So increasingly, there's a need to communicate value. Patients are paying more for drugs as they switch to high-deductible health plans, and they face larger out-of-pocket costs, particularly for specialty products. The divisions between biopharma R&D and regulatory approval and commercialization are blurry. Biopharma companies can't afford not to be proactive as patients and health plans negotiate access to their products. Putting drug costs into context requires access to patient data and evidence connecting drug intervention with patient health outcomes. This means that evidence generation has to continue after a drug receives FDA approval, as clinical safety and efficacy measures give way to real-world performance and demonstrated patient outcomes. Consumer expectations in healthcare have shifted in the last 5 to 10 years, due in part to experiences, as we said, in other industries. Easy access to health information, increasing costs, and a desire to understand at a physical and biological level what's happening in their bodies has led to stronger opinions about how, where, and when to deal with illness. Next, please. So there is movement, as you know, amongst the regulatory authorities. Regulatory authorities are looking at new ways to integrate patient experiences to drug review decisions, and working with patient data as regulations evolve will deliver a competitive advantage over companies that wait for the new laws to take effect. Patients are increasingly pushing for further inclusion into the drug review process to ensure that the drugs are truly addressing their needs in meaningful ways. In fact, FDA has suggested that the next PDUFA reauthorization will codify patient input as part of the review process. But life science companies are challenged by the regulations that restrict the sharing of information beyond what's included in the approved labels. The FDA's 21st Century Cures legislation, U.S. Proposed legislation, could alleviate this challenge by allowing drug companies to proactively share and promote such information. For example, most comparative effectiveness studies and cost-effectiveness data can only be shared if an insurer or a health system in the U.S. asks a pharmaceutical company to provide them, according to the current regulations. But as competition for market share increases, the ability to produce and communicate research showing that your product works better than another or saves money while providing a desired health outcome is a powerful message to insurers and providers, and of course a benefit to patients. In the U.S., however, FDA leaders are concerned that financial incentives will cloud industry research and promotional messaging, so they want to maintain tight control over that. Consumers are pursuing an agenda that can sometimes run counter to conventional methods of drug development and approval. Demonstrating that a tumor shrunk or that a biomarker was successfully targeted by a drug during clinical trials, which may help approval, doesn't necessarily mean that a patient will feel any better. In chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, for example, the ability to accomplish daily tasks such as lifting children or using a hairbrush without succumbing to breathlessness can be more important to patients than a clinical efficacy number. And this means that outcomes information beyond approval becomes increasingly necessary to gain patient consensus to actually spend money on your drug. Next, please. As you know, there are a number of existing and under development regulations and guidelines regarding the publishing of information on social media platforms, privacy regulations in the EU, how information is provided to patients both in general and both via social media platforms, and how these may be regulated now and in the future. This is an area which is undergoing a lot of modification and flux at the moment, and it certainly will continue to do so over the next couple of years. The challenge for both the regulators and the life sciences companies is how to control the cyclone, how to deal with the fact that enormous amounts of information through uncontrolled channels are going to be available to consumers throughout the world, and there's a need to ensure that this information is credible and accurate, while at the same time allowing people to get access to the information they need. Next, please. Increasingly, the evolution of regulations is going to have enormous input from the population in general. An example of this is the recent FCC Open Internet final ruling in the U.S. Congress couldn't have imagined, as the FCC said, that the day would come when nearly 4 million Americans would exercise their right to comment on a proposed rulemaking. This commentary, in part provided, of course, by the ability of the internet to gather opinion rapidly and provide it to relevant stakeholders, is only going to be increasingly true in the future. So rulemaking can no longer take place in a vacuum or in a tight community between regulators and the industry affected, but must pay attention to the larger community of external stakeholders, i.e. the public as well. Next, please. So what are the implications and the opportunities? Well, in life science at least, there are benefits. The patient advocacy organizations and networks can expedite recruitment and promote retention in clinical studies, which is good. The FDA's roadmap for patient-focused drug development will continue to encourage the use of clinical outcomes assessment to better understand patients' experiences. The PDUFA 6 negotiations and 21st century cures legislation underway make it evident that patients are becoming a more powerful stakeholder. Collaborations that deliver patient data and insights can reduce the need to generate such information once a drug receives regulatory approval and can provide a basis for additional outcomes research. And leveraging this data will provide an edge for companies that don't hide behind historical frameworks for clinical research or outdated perception of the existing regulations or where they're going. Patient organizations formed around specific disease areas have a keen understanding of these issues that matter most, and they can offer valuable insights to inform clinical trial design and protocols. Pharma companies also have to consider the various roles new entrants are playing to support patient organizations and to drive consumer engagement. 19 states have passed right to try laws in the U.S. in reaction to patient demands for access to new experimental therapies. ClinicalTrials.gov in the U.S. listed 343 open clinical studies that include at least one patient-reported outcome measure. And capturing evidence, therefore, at an increasingly granular level with respect to nuances in patient populations will deliver new insights in how specific patient populations respond to therapy. So we're not here to tell the industry how to deliver information, but rather, given that there's a need to increasingly communicate with the public in non-customary ways, to consider what tools may be available that better capture these possibly transitory interactions, mine them for significance, and preserve them for evidence of regulatory compliance. Next, please. So there is a reality that there's a balancing act for organizations between being successful and putting the business at risk. Pharma companies have to deal with 100,000 rules and regulations worldwide, which are growing every day. Companies see every year, a year-to-year increase in compliance budgets. At the same time, as we said, the world is going digital, and companies need to adapt rapidly to the digital health revolution. Regulators do as well. It's not much point in regulating traditional controlled media when there are so many uncontrolled media available for people to access. Next, please. Digital technology is impacting all relevant stakeholder interactions between the industry, regulators, patients, providers. The industry needs to have the ability to interact more effectively with consumers. The regulators need process improvements to make it more feasible for companies to communicate and manage these communications in an effective and regulatory compliant manner. The technology needs to be leveraged to monitor and archive evidence and to gather feedback on the performance and efficacy of drugs in the real world, and consumers need to be able to have a seat at the table in both the development of new therapies as well as the understanding of how effective those therapies are. Certainly, aging regulatory processes are hindering the industry's ability to work productively with regulatory agencies in the new health economy. And new regulations, therefore, with relevancy for engaging digitally are impacting all the relevant stakeholders, including regulators, industry, and patient providers. Next, please. An example of the use of social media to develop some relevant information, particularly about the efficacy and potential adverse events of drugs are illustrated here using social media as a data input source. There are something on the order of 650 million users and 58 million tweets per day about drug therapies. Only about 0.5% of these include a drug name and a potential ADR. That's only 0.5%, but that still adds up to a very large number of potentially identifiable ADRs. The challenge is, as I'm sure you know, is that the information is not provided in context. The language being used is not structured. Of course, the people making the comments are not medical professionals, and there are misspellings in drug name and adverse events, and there are query limits on the sites that people are using for doing this kind of analysis. Nonetheless, it's possible to do sentiment analysis on, for example, tweets. And this is an example of a first attempt to demonstrate the feasibility of a sentiment analysis using digital media monitoring to gain insight into the clinical use profile of 2 recently approved melanoma treatments. The high-level analysis showed that sentiment analysis has the potential for showing differences between the 2 selected test products, as well as information about treatments and adverse events. The challenge is to gather data like this while achieving and demonstrating regulatory compliance, which leads into some of the questions about what kind of tools might be available for gathering this information preliminary to analyzing it. We think the topic is worth elaborating further in a specific webinar with the project leaders of this project. So if you're interested, we'd be happy to discuss it with you further. But as I said, the issue here is not just how do you analyze the data, but how do you gather it, and how do you gather it in a way which assures that the information you're gathering has an audit trail, has the ability to, has a historical trail, and is capable of being data mined. I'll pass back to Rudy to lead us then into the next part of this webinar.
Well, thank you, Don, and for showing part of the scope we all are confronted with in society, industry, and regulators. And this is the reason why we feel that the stakeholders should get together to more quickly applying the speed that takes part in the outside world to see what needs to be regulated to protect the patient and what enables innovation in favor of the patient. So this is the balance we were talking about. So let's move now to the next session to handing over to Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Don and Rudy. Thank you for having the opportunity to be here with you on that webinar. Good morning and afternoon. My name is Patrick Barnett. I'm the CEO of Qumram. In the following section, I will present to you how Qumram is used by healthcare organizations, demo a specific customer use case, and then wrap my part with examples from other industries. Qumram provides a solution for session recording and replay across digital channels like web, mobile, and social media. The area of use is grouped in 3 applications, as you can see here on the slide. First, to ensure compliance and create evidence across the digital channels. Secondly, to detect and prevent fraudulent behavior across these channels. And lastly, to improve the customer experience and gain deep customer insight. In healthcare, we have the following experience. With the University Hospital of Zurich, we record user access to their Oracle Health platform and we create proper and visual evidence for accessing critical patient data. This is important because, as you heard also from Don, trust is a critical success factor, and ensuring that the data is safe and protected is an important step in such a digital initiative. With eClinical Health, who provide with Climpal a digital clinical trial platform, we ensure regulatory compliance, but more important, we improve the customer experience and provide deep customer insights. This is the case which we will show in a demo shortly after. Let me explain a little bit about Climpal so that you have an understanding what Climpal is doing. Climpal, customer of Qumram, provides a platform for electronic informed consent for clinical trials. Their intention is to transform clinical trials to be more modern, efficient, and patient-centric. Today, the platform is already transforming clinical trials and in use in studies ranging from very small, like 50 patients, to very large, 10,000 and more patients. Climpal has been adopted by several organizations, ranging from patient recruitment companies and research institutions to several top 10 pharmaceutical companies. Two examples of clinical trials are the VERCO trial for the Mendor medical device, which was done in early 2015, and a trial for Sanofi called the Liberty Asthma Quest, which is running at the moment. To give you the context about the Climpal demo, which you're going to see after this slide, let me first give you the goals of the partnership between eClinical Health and Qumram and frame the demo you will see shortly. The challenges eClinical Health faces is exactly what you heard from Don before, right? Is how to gather the data and achieve regulatory compliance in the same step. It is really about balancing the regulations or the requirements, the regulatory requirements, and additionally gaining patient insights. We call that compliant insights. Additionally to the audit trail which Climpal provides, they wanted to have an evidence along the entire process and across their digital channels. The process, as you can see on the slide here at the bottom, the process starts with a campaign like the one from VERCO on Facebook, which attracts the patient on the clinical trial info page, where they can pass a pre-screener. At the end, Climpal wants to gain more deeper insight about the conversion rate of patients joining not only the campaign, right, but also the info page and going through the pre-screener. These two parts will be shown now in a demo. For that, what we have done is we have recorded the demo, the live demo, which is on a Climpal demo platform, and we're going to show you the recording for this webinar. So what you can see here is, right, this is a dashboard for the physicians, and what he can see is not only countersign patient's consent, which would be here, as you can see, right, demo data, John Doe, but what he also can see is that a patient has requested to join a trial. Again, not critical data because Simon Charter is the CTO of Qumram, and this shows kind of some demo data. What the physicians can do here is he can click on show Qumram evidence, and then what he can see is the entire recorded session of Simon Charter when he came through the campaign on Facebook on the info page of that trial. This is an example, a potential example, right? It's a demo platform of a diabetes clinical research study. And what you can see is you can see how the user is moving with his mouse on the application. You see exactly what was presented to him, what he consumed, right, as information. And with that, you not only gather that information and document it and preserve it for a longer time period, right, to ensure that everything is properly documented. But also what you gain is a lot of insight about his behavior, where he's hesitating, and also about the customer experience he has. So what he is doing now on that platform, right? The user selected kind of to take part of that research study, and he's now going through the pre-screener, and you see exactly what the user is doing, and also where he is hesitating or where he had challenges, and we're looking for further information by clicking on the question mark. Here, as an example, you see he's hesitating between yes and no about irregular meal schedule, and that's potentially also something you can go after and ask specific question in the qualification process. Qumram's capability goes even further, right? We can track, we can record every keystroke, and even if a user would stop here the process, you still would gain a lot of insights, even if he hasn't sent the entire form. So it helps you to get a better understanding who has seen kind of your campaign, who joined that potential pre-screener, and where potentially you're going to even lose some of your patients, which could be perfectly suited for that research study. So I think you get the idea, right, about us recording the entire user session. Why? Because digital applications today are very often very highly personalized. So you need to ensure that that documentation or that this is properly recorded, and you can show evidence, and can always go back and say, or present what have you presented to the user, when, at which time, and what was consumed by him. So what we're providing is also tools, analytical tools like heat maps, where you see where he's moving his mouse. You can aggregate that data, which helps you also to get a better understanding where to improve an application, as an example. So these are just some typical features and functions which we provide additionally to better understand the entire customer experience. Let me show you another example, another demo here, which is about the customer insight. This is still about the Klimpal demo. This is now for the Klimpal people to better understand what the funnel looks like. Funnel means how many people are coming into the splash page, into their info page, how many are going through that, reading information, going to the pre-screener form, and then how many people are dropping within the form. So what you can see here is exactly that funnel which I've been describing, and you see in the form section 1 there are plenty of people dropping out, and now you can look into it why they are dropping out, and what you're gonna see is yellow the ones which you're losing, and blue the ones which are winning or which continue, and you see that many of them been clicking on having irregular meals, and with that disqualify for the research study here. But additionally, what you can see is that in form section 3, which is about selecting kind of the hospital and the physicians, we're losing sessions. In that, because it's only demo data, we're losing 2 sessions. Now we can look into it, and we can see why we're losing that person. So what you see again here on the demo, We're replaying now that user or that potential patient which was interested to be part of that research. Don't be concerned. This is demo data. Cyril Barnett being my son, so we've been using that data, not to give any real life data insights. And what you see is you can now exactly follow what he was doing, and you see that at the end he's hesitating to send out that form and to submit that form and to be part of the research. So you even he's ending kind of the form here. You still were able to gather the data, and you've seen that he filled out the form properly, and he would be a perfect patient to go after. So that would allow you also in the future potentially to go and do some retargeting to the patients and being approached by the hospitals or physicians in the future and see if you still can convince him to be part of that study. Let me go back to the slides here. As we presented here is really the demo. And as you saw, we are recording, we're storing, we're recording, we're gathering all the information. We create an archive, we create a history. It's like a time machine. You can go back and you have the full evidence. What have we communicated through our digital channels? What have we communicated on our website 2 years ago? Right? If there is something popping up, claim or other discussions, you can always go back and see what was published and then even go further, right? Because very often you have these personalized application. You can exactly show who saw what, which is in certain industry, especially the regulated industry, very important. But besides recording all information, right, we track the user interactions and document that too. So our customers are using that for regulatory purpose, and they store that data in their legal archive and keep that for between 7 to 10 years. This is relevant to ensure the regulations out there in the market, especially to deal with that in the era of the internet and across all digital channels, including mobile, as you heard from Don, right, is a tremendous trend coming. We are often asked about the privacy data and how to deal with privacy. And as you probably have seen, right, many of the pharmaceutical companies, organizations today already are presenting a disclaimer which explains on how personalized information is gathered and also for what. I think the most important one is that that data is safely secured, stored within the company and is not sold to other organizations, but is really only used, right, to increase kind of their product portfolio, to increase kind of a better service to their customers and patients. Besides the disclaimer, which the question often comes up, right? We also have the question about how to deal with social media and what the difference is between social media monitoring and social media records management. So I think what you got out of the demo is we're not a sentiment analysis solution, but what we're doing is really gathering the data, package that data, put that into an archive, and with that ensure kind of evidence for future questions. Let me give you here some examples, right, from other industries, and I will also talk about financial market regulator and what they're using Qumram for. So Qumram has many customers from other industry, mostly regulated industries. and very often out of the banking and insurance, but also the government industry. As an example, as you can see here, we helped the Swiss Federal Foreign Affairs Agency, the FDFA, to ensure compliance across their digital channels. For them, the internet is crucial and is their main communication channel, and for that, they had to secure and achieve compliance with the Swiss Federal Audit Oversight Authority policy for web and social media. The FDFA retains additionally invaluable knowledge in their global and constantly changing environment. So they're recording over 90 platforms, social media platforms, web platforms, so that they always can go back. First, they retain invaluable knowledge, as mentioned before, but they can go back like a time machine, and they can document properly what they have published, like in 2011, as an example. There is another case which unfortunately is something which companies have to deal with. With the digital age, there comes also a lot of new potential risk to the organizations. One is fraudulent behavior or cybercrime. The fraudulent behavior can not only coming from external, but it often comes from internal users. And what UBS is doing is their case is all about fraud detection and prevention for critical data called their customer identifying data. Qumram records globally all sessions, accessing customer identifying data, and integrates in real time with their business intelligence solution, which analyze and search for potential fraudulent behavior patterns. So this is important, not only to protect kind of the critical data, but very often it is about protecting the company reputation. The third example here is a healthcare insurance out of Switzerland called CSS. That case is about better customer service. They were able to gain a lot of customer insight, and with that, they are using Qumram in their call center, and with that, they've been able to reduce the average customer service call by 50% because they had the information at their fingertip, thanks to the Qumram solution. They also been able to increase their first call resolution by 60%. If you combine these two data, what was a tremendous gain for them was a cost saving, and they've been able to achieve an efficiency gain of 6,000 hours in their call center monthly. So a big benefit. Let me add another example, the last one here, which is not on the slide. We have Financial Market Authority, which job and task is also to oversight the entire financial market, the banking and the insurance companies. So we have local Financial Market Authority, which are using Qumram to survey the entire digital initiatives from these banks. So they're recording on a regular basis the websites from all the banks they need to oversee, and with that they're creating a long-term archive and evidence for future discussions or for future potential claims. That's the same which I think you as a regulatory body in life science here are dealing with, is you need to oversee more and more kind of the organizations, but also their main communication channels, which is turning more into to be the digital channels. So this is just a use case out of another industry, how regulators are using Qumram to do their work more efficiently, and also to automate that so that they can do that at a very low cost. I hope I was able to give you some insight about what Qumram is doing, how Qumram is used, not only to ensure compliance, but also can be used as a tool to prevent online fraud, and more important, to improve the customer experience. And I'm happy to answer any question which would come in through the webinar here and the box. As mentioned before, we have one slide here which address exactly a bit the discussion which I had before about social media monitoring and social media records management, because that's a question which often comes up, asking us if we can do what Don was presenting, the sentiment analysis, and that's not that's not what we deliver. But as you heard from Don, is one is gathering the real time or the real life data, analyzing that data. But the difficulty is, right, how can you ensure that data? How can you store that data? How can you archive that data for a long-term period? We provide the capabilities of social media records management. What we do is recording all social engagement that can be Twitter, LinkedIn, any kind of tweets or any kind of LinkedIn comments or any post on Instagram or almost any other social media platform you can envision. And what we're doing is we gather that data, we capture that data, so we record that and then store it, preserve that in an archive for a long time period. And with that, we create that evidence. Important to understand is that we're not the monitoring of it, but just a recording tool. The main case story is also a discussion which we had with a financial market authority organization, was that we can record or we can do surveillance on all employees of a company, what they are doing on all the social channels. We can see about their postings, commenting, and all the other things, including then doing some extraction and feeding that into a sentiment analysis tool like Don was describing. I think this is key to react, especially before an alert even happens. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, we've been thinking about putting a specific webinar together about this topic, and we will come back to you to present that webinar if you're interested. But we're also happy to visit you and specific have a workshop with you about these topics you heard today. So with that, Rudy, many thanks, right, for me being here and presenting. I hope you got some more clarity for the audience here on what Qumram is doing. So back to you, Rudy.
Well, thank you, Patrick, for giving at least some ideas about what a tool like Qumram could do in the regulated environment. There is one point before going to the questions that came in. Could you briefly explain what a heat map is, a term that is probably not so popular among the audience of today?
Yeah, so heat map is used, right? I give you a simple example, which probably all of us lived in the past, right? When you had to install any drivers on your computer at home, and then you've been going on a website to find a driver and download it so you can install it, and sometimes you're clicking widely on the page because you can't find the driver, and analytical tools would say, oh, that person is really engaged because he's doing a lot of things on that page. But in reality, right, you're almost angry because you can't find what you've been looking for. So heat maps is painting at the end a path where the person is moving with his mouse, where he's clicking. So you can aggregate that, and then you see the passes which all the users been taking, and it helps you to see that potentially the users don't see the information which you've been publishing, or they don't see the link which you've been publishing, because they never scroll down to that level, or it was too much hidden in too many pictures or too many text or whatever. So the heat maps is an analysis on the mouse movements. Where does the mouse move? Where do the people click? Or how far a person is scrolling down on an application, right? It can be, again, mobile or web application. I hope that gives you more clarity.
Okay, thank you. For the time left, let me go to one question here. So we use social media for some of our activities. We have yet no legal mission of, for example, surveillance in social media. What is your suggestion to an institution like ours? Don, could you pick that up, please? Don?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, we discussed the U.S. approach, and of course, different regulatory authorities in the EU have different views, some more aggressive, like the MHRA, than others. But our suggestion is to be proactive. You might be late with your overall mission of market surveillance if you're not, and we look at the speed of change in other industries and in healthcare, as we've discussed earlier in the presentation. We'd be happy to discuss this with you further, how you can be proactive even if you don't at this point have a legal mission, so that you can be prepared when you in fact do have a legal mission.
Okay, thank you. Patrick, you addressed at least partially another question that came up. Data privacy law does not permit us to execute such activities with Qumram, though I understand now what the value it could bring. Any thoughts to still learn with what is possible for a regulator? And my added question for myself is there a tool where, let's take the member states in the European Union with different national privacy laws that can identify whether this is by law possible to do or not?
So again, data privacy law doesn't state you're not allowed to do that, right? Data privacy law says clearly you need to make it completely transparent to the user, to the person, what you're recording and for what you're recording the information. And if you're recording the information to provide a better service to the customer, and you disclose that to the user, then this is absolutely legally allowed to do. Important is also that the person has all the rights, right, to come back to you and ask about what kind of data you're recording and what the kind of data you have from him, and can ask about deleting that information. But if you follow properly what's happening on the web, right? You see the cookie policies popping up on almost every page. You need to accept the cookie policy, and if you read the disclaimers, and the moment you accept kind of the cookie policies, right, you accept the disclaimer that personal data is recorded to provide a better service to yourself. So I think important is to really understand the data privacy law, especially the ones in Europe. Germany is an extreme one as an example, but
and Switzerland.
Switzerland too. But again, both are not saying you're not allowed. It's important you disclose. It's important you make it very transparent to the users, and it's important that you explain exactly for what data you're recording, and the data need to be in context of what you're going to do with it. So most of our customers, which are in the banking sector or insurance sector, financial services, it is interesting, right? There are laws like the laws like MiFID II, which is about consumer protection in the banking space, requires that everything what was presented to the consumer needs to be documented, right? They have these in German called Beratungsprotokolle, which you need to sign at the bank. And there's a conflict, right, or a potential conflict with the data privacy law. So it's not a right. I would say that the question would need to be rephrased about you're legally not permitted to do that. I think you need to look at it in more details and have a clear plan on how to approach it. And I think this is what LSCP, right, our partner here, or together with us, we are happy to come in and help you to find a way through that jungle of regulations and how to deal with that.
Okay, we'll come back to what we propose as a next step. But here's another question. Indeed, pharmacovigilance could be an area of application. How would you go about in the aim not to duplicate with MHRA's web radar? May I respond to this question myself? As we understand this project, it is not covering yet the archiving part. In order to launch a learning process, we suggest to have 2 to 3 NCAs coming together for a pilot and execute in the aim to merge such learning with the other project and move forward together, not a wait and see approach. So let's come to what we propose as a next step. You see a little menu here and what an application area could be. And we suggest you do some reflections on that. And as the next slide, please. Here is a proposal to discuss. A first step in a half-day workshop to elaborate what this would mean for your agency, and based on the findings, then to, for example, establish a digital lab to learn more and see where to apply best in line with your agency's mission. So, again, thank you for participating. Please stay tuned for other webinars to come. You see the 2 contact details for Patrick and myself. I can also, of course, provide the one for Don. I would like also not only to thank you for participating, but also for my colleagues, Patrick and Don, for providing input to this session. Thank you so much again, and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Rudy, for having us with you. And thank you and bye.